right, do we have setting this all up? All right, y'all, we're just waiting for some folks to jump on while I set up my little notes here. Right, we are almost set. Let me grab one thing, y'all. Sit tight for 1 sec. I didn't ask it to do that. Okay. On the other side. Boom. All right, let's get it. All right, y'all. So who's all on, folks? I think I had the chat on. Y'all gotta let me know because I've never used this thing before, so I'm kind of playing with it at the same. So can somebody just like post a message in the chat so I know that it's working? Oh, good. Nope, you're on time. It is working. All right, everybody. So while we're here, let's just jump into it. What's going on, Michael? I'm trying to see here. Trying to wait like a few more minutes to see who else jumps on, and then we're gonna jump into it. But in the meantime, while we're on a few things, have you guys because there's a lot going on in the news today, right? It's like the minute I upload and in the news video, it's like all the good stuff happens after the fact. Because I was scraping stories together for the last video. And then, hey, who's that? That's Day the Cute. I think I've seen you a few times on my channel. What's going on? Shada Shy Hill. Shada Shy. I think I know you too. What's going on? Leah Brown. Oh, I recognize your name. You on there all the time. What's going on? But yeah, like I was saying, it's crazy because like it seems like the minute I uploaded the video, everything just started going down. And then if you saw when I first uploaded it, clearly I had some information wrong and I had to take it back down and go and fix it. But what sucks is like when you go and have to edit a video, and I use Final Cut Pro for the actual videos that are not live, it takes forever to go and edit and piece it all together. So when I took the video down just to make it a 10-second edit because I was using the wrong footage when I was talking about Tech 9, because I had the other Tech 9, I was like, dang, I had to take the whole video down, fix that one snippet where I had the wrong Tech 9 and correct something I said about the Breakfast Club because I had the Tech 9s mixed up. And then it's like you got to recompress the video. So I was like, the hell, it'll just come out when it come out. But all right, who else is on? Alan, what's going on? Y'all check out Alan's page, by the way. He does music. He just posted on here. Check his page out too. He's been doing videos for a long time. Check his stuff out. Stephanie, what's going on? Sahar, Jeremiah. No, you're not late. I was already running late. Jeremiah, you just came in on time. Bethany, GRTV, I know you've heard your name as well. James Hudson. Who else is on here? Panadex. Listen, my eyes are a little dry. I can't see right now. Black woman with the voice. I just like the name. What's up? Nina Wallace, Nicole, Lady D. All right. So anyway, like I was saying, I'll kind of keep checking in with the comments while I'm talking about a few things. But yeah, it's crazy. It seems like a bunch of different things started happening. Just in the news. One, of course, everybody's talking about the whole Jussie Smollett situation and how all the charges were dropped. And I was like, man, this is one crazy story to follow. You know what I mean? It's like it just keeps going up and down. At one moment, you're being reported and it's being told that this happened. The next moment, this happened. The next moment, something else happened. You're just like, all right. That's why I just kind of checked out from the story. I was like, man, but, it still doesn't erase the fact that, something like Chicago PD, that's a hard group to really give your trust to, because we just saw what happened with Laquan McDonald. And then in addition to that, I'm kind of pissed because I don't know if you've seen what's going on with this Betsy DeVos, whatever this lady's last name is, and how she just cut all that funding for like the Special Olympics, and they want to cut back funding for support when it comes to those with autism. So they're cutting $51 million from that element of the budget, and they're cutting all the funding for the Special Olympics. And I'm like, y'all just, how evil are y'all trying to be? You know what I mean? It's one thing when you're trying to reallocate where funds go and make sure that things are fair. But when you're just doing things that pretty much are just straight up evil, you know what I mean? Like, and I think because I have so many people in my family who are special needs, and like my mom always volunteered at the Special Olympics. It's kind of like that one hits a little closer to home because I have a cousin that does the Special Olympics every year. And just to watch them go and say we don't have the money for it, when in reality it's $17.6 million. But y'all asking for what, 8 billion right now for a wall? It's just like crazy. Who else is on before I jump into my actual topic? Okay, shout out to Omaha, Nebraska. Judy. Oh wait, Judy is Judith. Judy from GRTV. That's the same Judy that's always on the Facebook page with the messaging. I don't know if that's the same one because there's a few. But shout out to you if that's the same one. RWP, what's going on? Oh, Tana May, I see you on. Good. I got some backup. Somebody started acting crazy. Torre, what's going on? James Hudson, I recognize your name. You're always important. Negra Lopez. Okay, what's going on? Goodness, let's see. All right, let me go ahead and jump into my actual topic. So what triggered this subject was pretty much, I spent a lot of time on Twitter after like 11 p.m. after I've done everything. And it's like, Twitter's like my way to wind down and go to sleep. And so I ended up seeing this tweet. I don't know if I can still get to it because I think the person blocked me after I responded. But the tweet had said, okay, here it goes. So it said, Cardi B is now the 20th highest RIAA certified female artist of all time with 41 million units, surpassing Janet Jackson. And so I was like, oh, okay, interesting. And so pretty much I kind of responded, was just saying, again, this is a conversation of physical album sales versus digital versus streaming. And if you honestly think that somebody like Cardi B eclipsed a 30-year career in 2 years, you got to kind of go back to the drawing board and look at things. So I just wanted to kind of dig into the conversation as far as what separates something like the physical era. And when I say the physical era in music, I'm talking about people actually physically going and buying actual CDs or cassettes or vinyls or 8-tracks, or whatever else they use. And then the digital era is when you had the introduction of iTunes, when you could go and purchase music digitally and organize it digitally without actually having to have a physical copy or tangible element of that music in your hand. And now we have the streaming era, which is what we're living in now. Let me keep jumping. What's going on? Dina Newton, Silver Spring. Oh, you down the street. All right. All right. Oh, yeah, Judy, I'm not going to say what you said. Olympia, what's going on? I hope your school stuff is going well. Anyway, but going back to my point. So the reason why I kind of took issue with the tweet is because what you're seeing now when it comes to music is that you're starting to see the erasure of what's happened in the past as far as the accolades of the different acts before, because now we're in an era where everything is instant, everything is quick, and people are somehow trying to equate all of the eras and make everything just interchangeable, and they're not. And me personally, I think when it comes to something like Billboard, and I think other music historians and anybody else who does music journalism, there has to start being pretty much written documentation showcasing that there are different eras into music. And when you start regulating or recording and documenting what somebody's success status is when it comes to album sales, you're going to have to pretty much show that there's a difference between what was going on physically, what was going on with the digital era, what was going on with the streaming era. Because today, it's extremely easy as a mainstream artist to get a platinum hit in the streaming era. It's not the same equivalent. And so there has to be some kind of threshold, because what you're seeing now is so many records that were held before 2005 all got eclipsed in 2005 at the start of when the digital era really became mainstream. It was introduced around 2001 going into 2003, but 2005 is when the digital era started to outpace the physical era when we talk album sales. Moving on. So let me get to my point. People are going to ask, what is RIAA? RIAA is pretty much the organization that regulates and certifies album sales in the United States. So RIAA is what that artist shouted out, saying, okay, Cardi B had 41 million RIAA, sorry, didn't mean to hit the mic, certified albums. And so what that means is this: pretty much RIAA counts all album sales in the United States. It includes things like SoundScan. It includes things like Sony BMG Club, which we'll jump into in a second. This is so awkward doing this live. Like, I'm so used to already having like my thought process just ready and just throwing it at you. Now I got to sit here and like really make sure this all flows. Let it flow like Tony. But anyway, so RIAA pretty much is the official way of counting how much an album sells in the United States. And the reason why the RIAA is pretty much that official aspect to look into when you're talking about album sales in the United States is because you have multiple entities that count sales. You had Nielsen SoundScan. You also had something like Sony BMG Club. However, SoundScan never would count something like Sony BMG Club. If you don't know what Sony BMG Club was, if you grew up back in like the 90s and early 2000s, you remember there used to be this magazine that would come out, and the magazine, you could get like 12 CDs for $9. And pretty much that was like the albums that were in overstock that they needed to get rid of because people might not have bought them fast enough. And so a lot of people went platinum and double platinum just from Sony BMG sales as far as the BMG Music Club. However, those sales were never counted in SoundScan. And that's why a lot of times when you see music stands arguing and you say something like, okay, TLC, Crazy, Sexy, Cool sold 10 million albums, but how come SoundScan only has it at about 7.5 million copies sold? It's at 7.5 million copies sold because SoundScan doesn't count something like BMG Club, which was that catalog we talked about. Same thing with something like a Mariah Carey Daydream album. Same thing. People had a lot of albums where RIAA would say they sold 10, 11, 12, 13 million copies. However, when you would look at SoundScan, sometimes the numbers didn't add up, and that's because you had additional entities that counted albums separately that were not reported to SoundScan and did not count towards SoundScan. And so that's where RIAA comes into play. So going to my actual point I wanted to make, another issue that you have going on now is a lot of artists who came out before 2005 or who had their peak before 2005, there's not an urgency or a sense of urgency to go and recertify albums. There's so many albums that are under-certified. When we're talking about certified, that just means gold, platinum, silver, multi-platinum, as far as like diamond. That's all certifications mean. When you're talking about when they would count albums, pretty much every time you moved more than 1 million units, it was platinum. You just kept adding it that way. And so as you saw the industry start to shift, a lot of artists just never took an effort to go and recertify their album. So since they decided to use Janet, I said, let me use her as a backdrop for this argument. We can use something like the Janet album that came out in 93. And so on record, as far as what the RIAA says, it says that they're sitting at about 6.5, 7 million copies sold in the United States. However, the album has moved an additional 1.5 million copies since 95, but it never got recertified because one of the other things is you also have to pay to get your albums recertified or certified. And a lot of artists are like, who cares? You know, it's not anything that's that serious to a lot of artists. They know what success they have. They have the revenue and everything to show it. They're not pressed about it. And so a lot of artists from before have albums that have sold additional 2 and 3 million copies that just never got recertified. And I think it's also because when you're talking about the era we're in now, everything is really like crazy fan base, stats, and album sales driven. If you go back 20 years, people weren't as pressed. Only people who really cared about that were like diehard fans. Let me pause and check in with comments and see what you guys are talking about really quick. Shout out to Josh, North Carolina. Shout out. Oh, dang, I wrote a lot of stuff in here. Dallas, shout out. Dana, what's going on? By the way, Dana, y'all, I told you in the shout out video, her EP came out on the 20th. Definitely check it out. Dang, y'all are not playing in these comments, huh? I can't read all this. Let me see. I'm scrolling down. Yes, exactly what you're saying, Dina, as far as question with talent. They're doing that with video games too. Yep. All right, I'm gonna come back in when I kind of get through my points. I'll take breaks and come back to the comments. But I want to get into some of the points that I'm trying to make. So going back with the certifications, like I said, again, if a label had bad blood, then they wouldn't go out of the way to recertify. So if you left your label, the label would be like, "What the hell with your album? Who cares?" So somebody like a Janet who was on 3 or 4 different labels, she was at A&M, and so when she left A&M and went to Virgin, A&M said, "Okay, well, we're gonna stop counting the Rhythm Nation sales, so it'll just sit at 6 or 7 million copies." You know, we know it sold like 14 million worldwide and some other things, but we're not going to count all that. Who cares? Because you're not at the label anymore. So there's that. We got to make it look like you're hurting because you're not with us anymore. And then Virgin went and did the same thing when she left and went to Def Jam. And so you have, you know, her caliber of catalog is in A&M and Virgin Records. And they're not going to ever probably recertify those. And Janet doesn't care either. Scrolling on. So when we talk about streaming, because I don't want to be somebody who's like streaming sucks, because I think there's pros and cons. I think the pros to streaming are, one, is access. You know what I mean? You have music literally at the palm of your hand. All it takes is a mouse click. Actually, I think that's why the person blocked me on Twitter, because I said you can't really compare SoundScan physical sales era to streaming because it's physical album sales versus mouse clicks. So that's cool that there's 41 million, I guess. You can't even, it's not 41 million mouse clicks because, you know, it's like, I forgot however many clicks you need for it to count as a sale. But it's cool that however many millions of people click the button to hear your song, but how many people are actually going out and buying your stuff? That's the conversation. But anyway, the good, again, access. And also with resources, one of the downsides to something like the physical era in music was, you couldn't just go out and buy all the music you wanted because that stuff wasn't cheap. If you remember, there was a time period where albums sometimes could retail as high as $26 if they were a double disc. And the average price at one time was anywhere between $17.99 and $19.99 for an album. Then there was a class action lawsuit, and people were saying they're being overcharged. And when this lawsuit was settled, everybody, if you went and you signed that little thing and sent it back in the mail, you got like $8 in the mail. And then that's when we saw the price of albums drop to about $9.99. I want to say around 2003, 2004. And that depended on how many tracks were on the album, how big the album was, what label the album was on, and so on and so on. And again, one of the cool things with streaming is that you can streamline. You know what I mean? Like, perfect example. So at my job, you guys, if you follow me, I work with kids. I do the after school program type thing. And so when the kids do homework, what we do is I always have music playing. I just think music kind of calms things, makes kids be more just tranquil as they do work, because some kids just don't like homework. They don't like doing no math and no reading. So you got to kind of make the environment somewhat tranquil. And so, I might have Spotify at my desk, where my office is, and then it might also be on my phone. And in the big room where the kids do their homework, there's this big giant TV that's hooked to the internet where there's Spotify. And so the coolest thing is I could have been playing a song at my desk, and then, I get up from my desk and go outside really quick, and I can transfer that same song to my phone, and it'll leave off from that exact same spot, and then go into the same room and have it shift over to the TV, and it's playing on all three spots. And then the coolest thing is, if I'm being lazy because maybe the song gets too loud, because, like if you have Spotify, for some reason, your song levels can be here. And then when the ads come on, the ads are way up here and the noise is just loud. There's this one ad they have. It's this really annoying song, but it comes on so loud. But the cool thing is I can sit right there when that ad comes up. I can just grab my phone, turn my phone down, and it makes the sound on the TV go down. So like that is one of the cool aspects of streaming. You know what I mean? And it's good for indie artists. For people like somebody like a Dana, or I'll throw myself in there, or anybody else who does music, who does their own thing, in this era where people already don't really like the idea of purchasing music because now it's such a given and it's just so available. Some people don't really like the idea of purchasing music. They just think it's something that's supposed to already be there. It's easier to convince people to go and click play on your song as opposed to paying 99 cents for it or $9 for your album. And so with indie acts, it's a great way to get exposure. It's a great way for you to go viral. It's a great way for people to really just check out what it is you have going. As opposed to if you went back 20 years and you're trying to get people to buy your album that you're selling out of your trunk, if you didn't already have some kind of reputation, that random person that you stopped in the parking lot of Dairy Queen was probably like, nah, some other time. And so that's one of the good aspects of something like a streaming era. But there are cons. And I think the cons are when you talk about, hold on, I gotta look at my notes here because I wrote so much crap. Oh, again, the politics of the industry and what's available. The worst thing, and I think the main reason why I do stream, but my main source of music is I still purchase music. Like right now, iTunes is my thing. I don't really buy physical albums anymore unless it's a favorite person of mine or if it's a vinyl. But really, my thing is I like to buy the digital version because I still want to own the song or still have it. But with the politics in music, what sucks is if somebody's beefing with their label and the label pulls everything off the streaming sites, you now no longer have that music. Or if those artists say, I don't want my stuff on that site, it is what it is. That's why, Beyonce fans sometimes get annoyed because sometimes everything is in Tidal. So when the Jay-Z and Beyonce project dropped and Everything Is Love, it was only on Tidal. I don't know if it's on the other ones yet, but so a lot of people were like, dang, man, I don't feel like paying. Now let me go on and do this 30-day subscription and then change my email and change my address in 30 days. So you have that. Or if you look at somebody like Aaliyah fans get pissed because there's not a lot of Aaliyah music on the internet. Because she was on Blackground. And so all of the Blackground artists, none of their stuff is on a streaming site. So if you're somebody who's trying to get into Aaliyah, or maybe you saw that terrible movie and then you said, well, let me go check out her music anyway. The only album that's available is the first one. You can't find One in a Million. You can't find the Aaliyah album. And that's because her uncle and folks over there at Blackground, and even though Blackground is no longer a label, they're just not going to release it. The same thing for Toni Braxton fans that want to hear the Libra album on Apple Music or Spotify. You can't get to it because it's not available. Same thing with like JoJo fans. All of those acts, Blackground. Let me pause and see what you guys are talking about. Let's see. Yep, Michelle, you're on it. Remember the days when you buy an album and you would go look at it, and you'd flip the little book, and it would have pictures, and it would have a little bit of everything in it. Like, that was the dopest thing about the physical era. Like, even just the smell of the paper used to just get you excited, especially if it was an album you were anticipating. Like, maybe you've been waiting for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and finally it's here. Like, you would get that album, and you could never get it open because the thing would be wrapped up in some kind of, I don't know what kind of plastic that crap was, but man, it would take you forever to get the album open. And when you could finally get it open, if you didn't end up busting it when you tried to open it, like, it's just an experience. So yeah, that was definitely dope. Let me see what else y'all are talking about. Yep, De La Soul, you're on the money with that as far as the conversation with streaming and everything, and the issues with labels. But going back to my point, the politics are an issue because, like I said, you may have a playlist that you make with some of your favorite songs, and then if that artist falls out with that label at any given time, that music is gone. So you technically don't own that music. What I always like about the physical era and even elements of the digital era is that once you get that music, you have it forever, unless you scratch your CD too much, and then you got to go buy another one. I remember I used to get the toothpaste and try to rub it on the side and then rub it on the shirt and do every, all of that. What else was I writing down here? So what I wanted to do is just to give some numbers and make things make a little bit more sense, because now we need to actually understand the business, because I think all of this ties into why you also have a lot of music fans who just hate what's going on creatively and who hate what's going on artistically in music. And I'm not talking about those who are indie acts, but I'm talking about mainstream acts. So we're going to take the year 1999, because that's 20 years ago, and we're going to compare it with the year 2000 and just talk about the revenue that comes from album sales. So in 1999, which was the peak of the physical era, as far as actual people purchasing albums, 2003 would go down as the peak as far as revenue that was made, but 99 served as the peak as far as people purchasing albums. And the reason why it dropped between 99 and 2003 was you had the introduction of Napster, which would indirectly lead to the creation of BearShare, Kazaa, LimeWire, what was another one? WinMix, all of the different P2P sharing networks where you could start getting music, illegally. Everybody and their mom was doing it. Like, listen, if you went to high school or middle school anywhere between 2002 to 2009, 2010, and you were in a car with one of your friends, you knew eventually when they were playing those songs, eventually you would hear AOL Music, first listen, or you might hear Tape Masters Inc. if you was listening to like a rap album. And so that was also happening. But going back to my point, so in 1999, you had 600 million users purchase albums at an average of about $64 per person a year. So on average, the average person was spending about $64 on an album in the year 1999. That generated about $40 billion in revenue. If we compare it to 2018, we had 900 billion streams. All right, think about the world population, which is what, like 7 billion people, 900 billion streams. All right, and so 900 billion streams, again, we're talking mouse clicks. And the way that revenue comes from streams, by the way, is pretty much it's the ad service. As far as the advertisements that come, that serves as revenue, and also the subscriptions that people pay monthly. But with something like Spotify, a lot of people are not even really using the subscription because you can still listen to everything for free. You just may not have access to certain songs. Like if you're somebody who doesn't use Spotify Premium, and the reason I keep using Spotify is because that's the main one I use. I know Apple Music exists. I know Tidal exists. I have all three. I just like Spotify for some reason. But, if you have some albums that you're listening to on Spotify, there may be that one song that's grayed out if you don't have premium. And so that's pretty much the difference. But like I said, 900 billion streams. But the revenue generated in 2018 from that 900 billion streams was only $9.8 billion, a fourth of what was made in 1999. All right. So look at the dynamics of that. All right. You're talking 600 million people in 1999 purchasing music. And I can guarantee you right now that there's more than 600 million people clicking a mouse, because, 600 million people means, you got to go and spend some money. 600 million people clicking a mouse, I think the number jumps up. So again, 600 million people spending an average of $64 a year on music and generating $40 billion. $40 billion in comparison to $9.8 billion in 2018. And so I want to bring up some other points, because we got to talk about what streaming actually, what it generates, because streaming doesn't really bring a lot of money. The thing is, when you bought an album, and let's stick with like after 2003, when they were usually retailing for about $9.99. Some albums would be $13, but $9.99 on Tuesdays at Best Buy was the move for everybody at the time. But for $9.99, you made so much more from that, or the label made so much more from the album as opposed to something like a stream. And even with digital sales, Labels would always tell you their biggest revenue source, even with all three existing, they make more as far as revenue from a physical sale than they do from a digital. And they make more, from a digital than they do with streaming. But going to my point, when we're talking to streaming sites, this is what you're making for every time, or this is what's being made every time somebody clicks a song. Now, Napster's not really, one of those streaming sites y'all are really using. But for those who use Napster for an artist, an artist gets 0.0167 cents every time somebody plays their song. All right. On Tidal, an artist gets 0.0110 cents every time somebody plays their song. Now, those are the two highest. That's the best you're going to get as an artist. Now, when you get to the other ones, Apple Music, if you went and you downloaded or you went and played one of my songs right now, I'm going to get 0.0064 cents when you play that song. All right. Now, mind you, I'm nobody in music, so I'm going to need about 2 million of those before I make $20. Google Play, you make 0.0059 cents per click. Every time somebody plays that song, that's what you get, 0.059 cents. For Deezer, you get 0.0056 cents. Spotify, which is my favorite, but also the most disappointing, or one of the most disappointing, you get 0.0038 cents for every time somebody plays your song. So for all the production and the effort you put into that album or whatever you did, every time somebody pushes play because they enjoyed your song, 0.0038 cents. Pandora, which is even funnier because Pandora, I think, has just now gotten to the model where you can actually select the songs. For the longest, it was just the radio idea. Pandora, 0.0011 cents. You're barely getting a thousandth of a cent. I feel like I got a lisp today, but you're barely getting a thousandth of a cent. What the hell? I guess I got one today, huh? And then YouTube, 0.0006 cent every time somebody plays your stuff. Absolutely crazy. So you're not really getting any actual revenue from streaming. Hold on a second. I done dropped my phone here. And I dropped my thing. Hopefully y'all saw my curl pattern while I was down there. But anyway, and so this is why that's important, because when you're talking revenue, when a record industry was able to generate $40 billion in revenue, think of where that money goes. Yes, it's going to the artists, it's going to the producers, it's going to the songwriters, it's going to royalties, but it's also going back into the label, which means that they can invest in those artists. So $40 billion, this is why when you look at something like the music videos that came out in 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, you saw these huge, big budget videos where they would invest $2 and $3 million in a video. You saw them investing in the A&R. You saw them investing in the artist development, in the branding, and pretty much everything that they had going. It was pretty much, and also touring. Touring is different today than it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, the label gave you so much support in addition to the sponsors that you would need to get when you went on an arena tour or a stadium tour or even a theater venue tour. Today, the labels are not really putting that much into your touring package because a lot of these acts have already signed a 360 deal anyway. So, it's more so, okay, we already know you're not going to make a whole bunch from album sales. You'll make a little something here from touring, but we want a piece of what you're going to make just from your name alone, because we're going to say that we made you. So yes, you have the Nike commercial, or you got the endorsement with Sonic and you out there singing about hot dogs and slushies, but we get a percentage of that. That's where the shift went. And so when you're talking about $40 billion shifted over to $9.8 billion, you're operating with a fourth of the budget you once had. That's why the music videos are so cheap now. But with that, the good thing is for indie acts, you can go and find your cousin down the street who has a nice camera, and they can get you a video that's almost as high as quality that the people on major labels are coming out with now. So there are some good and bad, but mostly bad from an industry standpoint. And again, going back to when we're talking about accessibility, the reason why I don't go up for when people brag about this person's had 1 billion streams of their album in 2 months. Think about when you were 9 years old. Let's look at life through the eyes of a 9-year-old. In my experience growing up, like I said, I'm from this small town called Spanaway, Washington. And the only thing in Spanaway when I was 9 was Kmart. Actually, no, I lived in Italy when I was 9. So I didn't even get back to Spanaway until I was 11, but we're just going to pretend I was in Spanaway while I was 9. So Spanaway, the only thing that was there before they built the Walmart was Kmart, and a Mexican restaurant, El Hidalgo, Dairy Queen, this auto shop called Grease Monkey, and my school, and then a bunch of farmland. That was the hometown. And so, however, I knew, and now mind you, we weren't secluded. You could still go to Seattle and Tacoma, which was right down the street, and everything was there. But the point I'm making is, every time we went to Kmart, my mom knew the first place I was gonna go to was to the CD section. You know what I mean? And mama, can I please get this CD? And my mom, ain't nobody paying for that. No, you're not getting that. Ain't nobody paying no $17 for that. No. And so every blue moon, I would be able to convince her to get maybe one album every 2 or 3 months. And so for me growing up, it took years to build and collect my stack. You know what I mean? And so a lot of people just sometimes weren't willing to spend as much on albums, which is why when you're talking about the average person only spending $64 on an album, that's the equivalent of like buying 5 or 6 albums. And then I also think back to like even when I lived in Italy, because I think one of the cool things now with music is you can hear what you're going to get before you purchase it. Remember, you go back to the mid 90s, you didn't get to hear the album. You just had, all you had was that first single that they pushed out. And that single would give you insight to what that album might sound like. And so that's what you wrote on. You would just hope the album's good. But going back, when I lived in Italy, now at this point, this is like 98, 99, because we were military, they had this place called the Power Zone, which was in the PX. The PX was kind of just like the Walmart for military folks, and the Power Zone would have been like the Best Buy. And so this was around the time where they started giving you that option to sample albums, kind of where you couldn't hear the whole thing. Maybe you'd push the button and they'd play like 20 seconds of 3 songs off the album. That's all you would get. But I remember, because I lived in Italy, because there was no MTV, there was MTV Italia, but not like American MTV. And my dad was like, I'm not paying. You had to pay a special cable package to get the Italian cable. My dad's like, ain't none of us speak no Italian. We're not paying for that. And so we only had one channel and it didn't have any music on it. And we had one American radio station that played a different genre each hour. And so the R&B hip hop hour, I think it shifted. Either it was at like 8 p.m. and then sometimes it would be like 2 in the afternoon, but I'd still be at school. But anyway, the point that I'm making is when you go to the CD store, you didn't know what any of the music sounded like. You unless it was a super, super, super huge hit that would still somehow end up in commercials and everything like that, you didn't know what the album sounded like. And I'll always remember I went one time and there was this, I want to say it was somebody on No Limit Records. Either it was Mystical or was it Master P? It was somebody. Just know the album cover was the most interesting thing I saw. It was bright. It was green. They had all these jewelry and rings and everything like that. And so for me being, 10, 11 years old, the colors popped out to me. And I was like, oh, I want this album. I had no idea what was on it and everything like that. And so, of course, when my mom buys it and we listen to it in the car and she, what is this? The way she took that CD and threw it in the trash. But again, like you didn't have access to know what was coming. So there was more effort put into making sure the albums were good by the labels. They weren't just going to put out anything because people were kind of just, they wanted to make sure that you were getting your money's worth. So like the eyes of a 9-year-old in 99, you're not going to just be able to get all the music you want. Today, if you're 9 years old and your mom has Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, they can just go and click all the music they want free, just at their hands, anything they want. So the music is more accessible, which is good. But the other issue, I was writing something that I wanted to say. Oh, yeah. The other issue, though, is that because it becomes so accessible, it becomes undervalued. It doesn't become something that is a social luxury. It's something that people just think is supposed to always be there. And like I said, going back to the experience of being 9, if you were a 9-year-old in 1999, when your mom might cave in and buy you that album at Target or Walmart or wherever, and you prayed to God that they didn't get you the edited version so you didn't get laughed at on the bus, you could collect your little albums and you would be so pressed to have your little 20 little albums. And you would listen, don't judge. Tanae, I don't know if you're still on this, but you're about to laugh. Hold on, y'all. Let me see if I still got it. Do I have it? I do. Haha. So everybody remembers the days where you had these and you had that big, giant, huge CD collection and you just had CD after CD. Like, what's in here? This Outkast and A-Marie, Diddy, Dirty Money. This is from when I was still in college. Brandy, Jill Scott. I see some burned CDs in here. I was in here stealing music. Alicia, Bad Boy. Haha. Yeah, so you remember these days when you would go, Lord, you remember those days you would go and you would buy those albums, you know what I mean? And you thought you were the dopest person at school if you had that whole collection of albums and you could walk around. Good memories. Let me flash and see what you guys are talking about really quick because I've been rambling. All right. Dang, I can get a scroll down here. Let's see. Yeah, y'all get FYE. I remember that. Yep. Let's see. Oh, y'all have your own little conversations in here. All right, y'all go ahead and shoot your little shots. All right, Love Connection. Um, Friday night videos on MTV. I remember that, Damien. Yep. Um, let's see. um, is that Michelleine talking about you and your brother fighting over the CDs? I remember those days too. Somebody, especially if you let somebody borrow your album and they didn't give it back. I remember I borrowed this girl's album and she jumped out the bushes waiting for me after school because I had the CD for like 2 weeks and she wanted it back. And she said her dad was pissed off because dad wanted to listen to it too. Funny. Anyway, let me keep going to my point. So going back to this RIAA thing, and by the way, this is not a dig at Cardi, and this is not something to take away from her success. Her success is her success. The problem is you can't make it interchangeable with artists who came out from before her era. In my opinion, like I said, music journalists have to make they have to make an effort to note the differences in the eras. I think when you start calculating album sales and single sales and talking success, you have to do it from a standpoint where you have checkoffs or cutoff points. So one cutoff point would be solely the physical era, solely the era where people had to actually purchase and go buy albums, where people, you know, if an album came out, you didn't just turn over in your bed at midnight and hit play and now you streamed it. No, it meant you had to get up and go to the store and drive to whatever part of town you went to, go and pray to God it wasn't sold out if it was going to be a hit album, and go and purchase it and buy it. You know, different era. There needs to be a cutoff for that. Then you need a cutoff for a merged era where you had the physical era start and merging with the digital. So you had the physical digital era, which I would say would be like 2001 to about 2012, where people were buying albums and they were also getting it digitally on like iTunes, Amazon, everything like that. So it would be like cutoff for physical sales, a separate cutoff for solely physical sales and digital together. And then you'd have that digital into streaming era where it's kind of, I want to say 2012 to about 2016, that era where you had people still purchasing on iTunes, but you had a lot more people starting to stream. That should be a cutoff, and that should be an era that's locked in. And then there should also just be solely the streaming era. And then you can also have one where you just have all of it combined in one. But I think there has to be you have to be able to separate all of that, or otherwise the accomplishments of everybody who's come out before the streaming era are all going to be eclipsed in like the next 10 years. It's just a given. You know, something like the word billion just looks so massive in comparison to hearing the word gold 500,000. It's just no comparison. And one of the other things that you also have to remember is when you talk about the physical era, and we're talking singles now, because Cardi B, the certifications she has right now are really all singles. You know, if you're talking about what her current album has physically moved, I think it's sitting at about 500,000 copies. But the singles that she's been on, those are the ones moving the numbers. And then when you start questioning the numbers and you look at the division of where they're coming from, it's streaming and some digital, but really all streaming, because Cardi's fan base is a lot younger, and she's pretty much, I don't want to say she's the face of anything, but like I just look at like what goes on with the kids and stuff I work with. You know, she represents an era where kids don't even do digital. They're not buying music on iTunes. That's unheard of. The only people purchasing music physically are older audiences. The only people going and getting anything digital are the people in my age bracket. And even us, we're starting to shift over and click the mouse as well, just because after a while you're like, hell, I ain't paying for that. And so there's that. But I wanted to talk about the singles and the digital sales. So one of the things I had here, goodness, do I want to shift this together? How do I want to merge this? All right. So when we're talking singles and albums, like they said, Cardi B is certified at about 41 million records certified at the moment. And Janet said about 40. And that's in the United States. And that's solely album sales and singles combined for somebody like a Janet. But when you go back, you have to remember, when you talked about the physical era, albums were the say all be all. That's what the labels were pushing. The goal was get the albums to sell. And so you had albums that had a few hit singles and the albums were moved. You know what I mean? And so singles didn't sell that much until the digital era started. The average amount that a single sold in the 90s would have been anywhere between 250,000 and upwards of close to 2 million if the song was a huge, huge, huge blockbuster international smash. You know, then when you got to the digital era, you saw the shift where the album sales started dropping a little bit, but the single sales went up, and you saw the single sales start ranging anywhere between 2 and 7 million copies as the album numbers went down. And today, when you're talking about streams, you know, one, it's hard for them to count singles because they're putting the focus so much on, you know, just every track is a stream. Every track counts as a sale. And so with the sales, because they're trying to somehow figure out what the threshold would be and how does that equate to platinum or gold, it's hard to measure. That's why it changes every week. You remember 2 years ago, YouTube, the amount of weight that YouTube counted when it came to pushing album sales was higher as far as streaming and everything like that. And so the numbers go up and down. They try to calculate and add in, ringtones at one point to try to have that add up to the sales, because there was a moment where record labels were scrambling to figure out how do we make up this revenue that we're losing from people who are illegally downloading music. And one of the things that they did was, let's get people to be more driven into getting singles as opposed to albums. Because if you had something like BearShare or Kazaa or LimeWire or WinMix, you have free access to everything right then and there. You click the mouse and you sit and wait your little 5-10 minutes for the song to download and put it on your little mix CD. And if you were like me, I was a dork. Every mix CD I had, I would label. Like, it would be like Mike mix number 12. I don't know if Tanae's still on here, but Tanae can remember them days being in the car. And I wouldn't pull off until I found the right mix. So I'd be sitting. It would be like Cleo from Set It Off. She'd be like, can we go? I'm like, no, I'm looking for mix number 22 because you got a song on here I want to hear. Like, you know what I mean? So it was easier to convince people to just purchase a single. You may not be able to get them to get that $9.99 album, but they might be able to spend 99 cents on that single. They might just click download and go ahead and pay that 99 cents for a single, especially when you started seeing the artists mark the singles down. So you saw, I think Katy Perry tried this when they were trying to get that 5th #1 from the Teenage Dream album, and one of those singles got marked down to like 69 cents just so it could get to #1. That's kind of what everybody started doing. You know what I mean? What are we talking about here? It is very oversaturated. Yes, it is. The Napster days, I remember that lawsuit. She said, what she said, worst thing ever, waiting for Mike 87. Can we just go? Y'all don't understand. Like, so Tanae, that's one of my good friends from college. And so we've just known each other for like 10 plus years, but she understands the years of me in my car, especially when I used to have the silver car that didn't have an aux cord and all you could do was play CDs. I mean, we would be getting ready to go out somewhere and I'm like, we can't go until I finish burning this mix because I want to ride to this song. Like that's the era I came out of. These up and coming kids and the people who are in the streaming era, they don't have to come out of that. That's not their thing. But anyway, like I said, we said before, revenue for record labels has always, physical sales always brought in so much more money in comparison to digital, in comparison to the streaming. Now, what I do want to talk about is there was a shift, however, because albums were not always the say-all, be-all of record labels. If you go back to the 60s, the goal was have a hit single and get that hit single out, and then you put it on an album. So that's why you had a lot of hit albums, not hit albums. You had a lot of hit singles, and you don't remember the albums they came out on. One of the interesting things is there was a dynamic. You had two extremes of the industry when you go back to the 60s and the early 70s. You had artists who had these really, really great albums, but sometimes the singles weren't that good, and the singles would never really do crap. And then you had albums where they had these blockbuster, wonderful singles, and then the rest of the album was like, what is this? And a perfect example is Minnie Riperton had an album that came out before the days of Loving You and Back Down Memory Lane and Inside My Love. She had an album come out. I can't even think of the name of the album, but it had no hit singles. However, production wise, it was a brilliant album. When you look at something like Rolling Stone, which I don't use them as a threshold of how to measure if an album is good or not, because they dropped the ball so many times. I remember they said Brandy's Full Moon wasn't good, and they said Michael Jackson's Thriller was just okay. That's when I knew they were canceled. But when you look at a lot of those lists and they talk about the greatest albums of all time, a lot of times you'll see albums that came out in the 60s and the 70s, and you don't remember any of the singles that came from them. And even though you may not have been born, you have to recognize a lot of the music from the past we're familiar with. You heard them in commercials. You heard them in movies. Your parents played them when it was time to clean the house on Saturday. Nothing worse than waking up on Sunday to Patti LaBelle because I knew it was time to clean up. If I heard Patti LaBelle playing on Saturday at 8 in the morning and that vacuum on, I'm like, damn, man, we about to be cleaning for like 5 hours. And then I hear my mom, yeah, I thought I told you. Okay, so you know what I mean? So you knew the music, but the point that I'm making is there were so many albums that came out in that era that are extremely just ranked with so many accolades, but they never had hit singles because some people were just so into the music they didn't care about hit singles. Because you got to think something like Billboard was new and random to some people, especially in the 1960s, because Billboard came out in 1958, and so people who were artists before 1958, they weren't paying attention to what was number one and what was who cared. They were getting their check from people who bought the album and they went and they toured. So that was one extreme. On the other end, you had artists, the focus was get a hit single and then throw some songs around it and put out an album. And so we're going to make the money from the single, but if we can get enough idiots to go and buy the album that wasn't really that great, we can get some more money to fund the next project. And so you saw a lot of artists constantly dropping albums. Aretha Franklin was one, and I'm not saying her album sucked or anything, so don't take it that way. But when you talk about her during the Columbia years, sometimes she'd have 2 albums come out in the same year. And the emphasis would be a single that they would push. The emphasis would be, that one single they push, and she'd go and do a lot of covers and do a lot of jazz original pieces and everything like that. And the sole focus would be on that single. And so the shift changed around I want to say the mid 80s, because technology got better. You were able to put more tracks on an album, because you remember before then most albums were 9 songs, 8 songs. You could only put what could fit on the vinyl, unless you were Stevie Wonder. He was going to do what he wanted and have double albums, and you go get his album on vinyl. It'd be like 3 different records you got to put on. Stevie said, I got a whole body of music I want to do, and y'all gonna listen to it. And here we go. So Stevie would be an artist who I think his focus was, and I'd say he'd be one that laid the blueprint for the idea of having an album that focuses on not just singles, but still a great body of work and good singles. I think Stevie's one of the few that pioneered that. And so when you got to the 80s and technology was better, because now you had the cassette tape, now you had the introduction of CDs was on the way, albums could be longer. And so when you got to the 80s, albums could be longer. MTV came out August 1st of 1981. You had BET coming out in 79. You had VH1 coming out. You saw the era of the pop star emerge in the 1980s, where you saw a shift. You go back to the 1960s. If you saw a magazine cover, most of the people on that cover would have been supermodels. You didn't see the person with the hottest song out that day on that magazine cover, unless it was a specified type magazine specific to a demographic of people. And so the 80s was the era of the superstar, or the birth of it. And that's where you got the Madonnas and the Michaels. We know Michael came out before then, but Michael, everybody knows Thriller era and Bad era Michael, as far as the impact and the record sold and the stadium sold out, you can't even compare it to the Jackson 5 days. And no disrespect to that, but I'm just saying the impact. Like I said, if you saw the video I made where I said there was never going to be like another Madonna, Whitney, Michael, Prince, Janet, Mariah, and I talked about how those acts came out of an era that sealed off to everybody before it and everybody after it just because of the way everything aligned. That's kind of like what I'm talking about. So with all of that, as far as the superstar elements and the MTV and the music videos and radio stations shifting from the AM formats in genre and top 40 formats to an FM and genre specific format, all of that happened. And so now focus was not just on singles. It wasn't just put out a single and come out with a crappy album, because now people wanted to actually buy a whole album. So people would come out with an album, and the focus was on making sure you also had good singles. And so you had bodies of work. And that's why a lot of the albums that you see get accolades today and albums from the last 30 years, you're familiar with, because yes, you recognize the great singles that came from them, and you also recognize and appreciate the body of work if you had those artist albums. And so that became something that was more popular. And so now when we got to about 2005, there was that shift again, because now it's 2005. Napster's been out, BearShare's been out, Kazaa's been out, LimeWire's been out, WinMix has been out. Everybody in my generation has been getting music for free for the last 4 or 5 years. Labels are scrambling. And so there was a shift. Emphasis was still on making great albums, but it was more so about pushing the singles. And this is where you saw the rise and the uptick in the amount that singles were selling. Because like I said, you go back to the 90s, some of the biggest albums, the singles weren't even really doing that much. They were doing, a little something here and there, but really it was pretty much the albums that carried. So I want to give a prime example. So we're going to bring up Drake, because I want to bring up some current people, because I will be that one that'll stay in 1995 for the rest of this video and piss some of y'all off like, dang, man, can you get with the times? So here's the point that I'm making. And what I was going to say also, damn, if I drop this phone one more time, I think I got a good case. What I was going to say, I'll come back to it later. But anyway, what you noticed is, like I said, albums were the emphasis when you got to the 90s. Labels were happy about a single doing well, but they were happy that the single would do well because they knew, somebody gonna blow me up right now in there. They knew that if the single was doing well, people would flock out to get the album. Because you remember, albums at one point used to be a movement. There would be anticipation for an album. You go back on YouTube and just look at the promotional campaigns for albums that came out. One of the coolest ones I thought was Aaliyah's 1 in a Million campaign. Because if you remember, we talked about this a little bit in the R. Kelly video, but at the end of the age ain't nothing but a number era, a lot of teenagers were kind of turned off to Aaliyah because one, she was a little too grown for some people. Some people thought she was kind of trashy once the rumors started coming out about R. Kelly and this, that, and the third. And then you also had Monica out, you had Brandy out. So teenage girls had a choice with who they liked. The girls who all wanted to be grown and thought they were 25. These would be the girls that were 16 bragging about they got a boyfriend that's 19 and all that crap. They loved Monica. No disrespect to Monica, but Monica, like, it's just Monica had such a more mature image, like, in comparison to Brandy. Brandy was doing the Nickelodeon Awards and all. Monica was like, I'm going to the Source Awards, y'all. I got a song with Tretch from Naughty by Nature. What's up? So you had that element, and then you had Aaliyah. But what they did with Aaliyah, because they had to do damage control after all that R. Kelly mess was going on. If you look at the commercial for that album release, it's really interesting. It's like she comes out of the sewer and everything. She has a new image. She has like the shades on. She's like kind of like the rebel without a cause. And you have to remember the sound that she was coming out with was so unheard of at the time. We talked about this in my R&B is Dead video, but the element of like 1 in a million. Like I said, if you went to the mid-90s, the sound at the time was kind of like like some kind of like a real smooth boom. That was the beat. 1 in a million comes out and it's a and so people were like, I don't know if this is an up tempo or if this is a slow song, because I can bust out an 8 count to this, but I can slow dance to this at the same time, or me and my girl can grind to this on a dance floor. I don't know what to do with this. And so it was a new sound, it was a new image, it was all pushed out, it was a perfect rollout. And so it was a great way for her to redeem herself as an artist. And that's why today, when you reference somebody like an Aaliyah, most people gas up the 1 in a Million album and they gas up the Aaliyah album. And the Age Ain't Nothing But a Number era kind of gets forgotten. And yeah, you hear back and forth on the radio during Throwback Lunch Hour, but everybody who really comes into, even when you talk about the imaging and you talk about like an Aaliyah poster, the first images that come to your mind are all the images that came after 1995. Get what I'm saying? So again, the albums, it was a rollout. And so people wanted the album to do well, get a hit single, but really push the album. So let's talk numbers really quick, shall we? And I'm going to start wrapping this up soon because I don't want to talk y'all ears off all night. So I'm going to use Drake as an example. So Drake is pretty much one of the biggest artists that's out. Drake's just been killing the game for years now. He's been able to cross over, not just from hip hop, but into the pop world. R&B audiences appreciate him. Hip hop acts appreciate him. The pop audience appreciates him. And so let's talk about what his singles did. So God's Plan is currently his best-selling single. His single God's Plan sold 8 million copies. 8 million copies. Now remember, this is also a combination of streams. Like with streams, I forgot how many streams equal a real sale and everything like that. So this is a combination of digital sales and streams. So 8 million copies. Hotline Bling, 7 million copies. One Dance, 7 million copies. Forever, 6 million copies. Hold On, We're Going Home, 6 million copies. And I'll kind of stop there because it keeps getting lower and lower. But the peak singles that I'm saying, 8 million copies. However, if we go to the Thank Me Later album, how much did the actual album sell? The album sold 1.8 million copies in the United States. All right. And so that's the point that I'm making. There was a shift. The shift was, let's focus on the singles instead of the album. Let's get these really big hit singles in this digital era where people will click and pay 69 cents or 99 cents for that song, because we're not sure if we can convince them to go out and buy an album for $9 or $13. The only people who are really going to go out and do that is if, the people really like the singles or they're big fans. And that's where we saw the shift. Going back with his album, the Take Care album, 2.3 million albums, but it was certified 4 times platinum. That kind of goes back to what SoundScan counts versus other entities that may not be counted with SoundScan. Nothing was the same, certified 4 times platinum, but the actual physical sales as far as people buying the album or people purchasing it digitally, 1.7 million copies. And then Views from the Six, another example, 1.6 million copies. So you see what I'm saying? Like he has these big, and then Scorpion, which is the most recent one, it's sitting a little bit under 500,000. But to be fair, that one just came out in June. So what you're seeing is you're seeing the fact that the singles are what are giving you the big number. So when you're talking about certifications, you can rack up. It's easy to rack up 120 and 150 million records in RIAA certifications with singles because they're selling more. So if we go back and we flash back to, we're going to use Boyz II Men because they were one of the biggest acts out of the 90s. If we go back and let's talk singles versus album sales, all right? So Boyz II Men was unique because they broke 3 records with 3 singles. So they had End of the Road, which was #1 for 13 weeks. At that point, it held the record for being one of the longest songs to be #1 on the Hot 100 chart. Okay, one of the biggest songs to come out of 1992. Guess how much it sold? You know, because it must have been like 8 million copies like Drake, right? No, 1 million copies. Just platinum. Platinum. Number one song, 13 weeks. So for one whole season, for all the spring or winter or whenever it came out, it was the number one song. You heard it all day on the radio. You heard it in the grocery store. They sang End of the Road at my grandma's funeral in 93. Like you heard End of the Road everywhere. And for all of the accolade and the success and the airplay and the exposure that it got, it went platinum. The next single, I'll Make Love to You, broke the record that End of the Road had and was number one for 14 weeks. And it was also the leadoff single for the 2 album. And so I'll Make Love to You is an even bigger hit. It's number one for 14 weeks. It's everywhere. Even when you're like on your couch at like 3 a.m, and that Time Life commercial comes on and they start playing them R&B gems, that's always in the mix. That I'll Make Love to You. You know what I mean? 14 weeks to number one. Guess how much it sold? It has to be like 20 million, right? Because that would just be how the industry works. Nah, man. It was platinum. Just platinum. Just 1 million copies, you know, just platinum, not 8 million copies, but platinum. And to be fair, if you go back to singles back then, singles were not 99 cents. They retailed anywhere between about $4 and $7. But you got the single, you may have got a radio edit, you may have had an extended version, you may have also gotten a remix, you may have gotten a B-side, it might have had the acapella, it might have had the instrumental. And so when you would buy the single, it had like 5 or 6 tracks on it, so it retailed for a little bit higher. And so that was the element of the singles. What are we talking about here? I'll come back to y'all real quick. And then next point. Oh, yes. Mariah Carey, Boyz II Men, One Sweet Day. The song that still holds the record for being the most weeks at number one, 16 weeks. So this, like Boyz II Men, Mariah was just having a great time during that era, but and TLC as well. But like, so Boyz II Men had a song that was number one for 13 weeks. Followed up a few years, like a year and a half later, with a song that was number one for 14 weeks. And in the same year, follow up with another song that's number one for 16 weeks. Guess how much it sold? And again, this is the song that holds the record for the most weeks at number one ever. You know what I mean? This is the song you hear all the time at high school graduations when the kids start crying because they realize that camaraderie will never happen again because they're all about to split off and go to separate sides of the country. You know, 1.3 million copies. That's it. The most successful single as far as airplay and Hot 100 success, 1.3 million copies. But when we get to the actual albums, so when you go to that first album where we said the song with the 13 weeks at number one, 9 million copies sold of that album. 9 million copies sold. Do the math. And remember, we said during this time period, CDs were retailing anywhere between $17 and $19. Do the math. Think of what that label made from that album. Let's go to the next album, the album 2 that had I'll Make Love to You on it. And mind you, that 9 million was just the United States. I didn't say what it was doing globally. All of these stats right now are just the United States. We're not talking globally because then the numbers really increase. But the 2 album, 12 times platinum in the United States. All right, just the United States. When you go and look at the real numbers, that crap is like 20-something million copies. All right, 12 million copies sold. Now look at let me skip to the next one. And then the Mariah single, 1.3 million copies. But Mariah's Daydream album in the United States is like 17 million copies sold. And so, again, when you're looking at the dynamics, in comparison to Drake, yes, Drake has these singles that are selling 8-9 million copies, but they're retailing for 99 cents. And then when you talk about where the majority of the actual revenue is coming from, it's not coming from people buying the music on iTunes or Amazon. It's people going on their phone and hitting play. Play, play, play. And so enough people hit play 1 million times and it counts as a sale. So that's kind of like if I go and I want to go buy a house. You know, the physical era symbolic would mean when I want to go to buy a house, oh, this looks nice. Okay, I'm going to pay for it. Here's my, let me get my FHA loan and here's the money and here's my mortgage. Let's get it. Streaming in comparison, or as far as using a symbolic excerpt or a symbolic version to kind of showcase what it would be like of purchasing a house and comparing it to streaming, it would be like, I like this house. I like this house. I like this house. I like this house. If I say it like 30,000 more times, how many more times do I got to say it before it's mine? I'm not going to pay anything. I'm just going to keep saying I like it. And eventually, because I've said I like it so much, that I like it. So I guess that counts as me purchasing the house. That's kind of what streaming feels like to me. And so you find that it's just extremely awkward. Let me take a quick break and let's jump to some comments you guys have here. Let me scroll here. Somebody said Raiden. Yeah, Rihanna is the perfect example of that. I always say Rihanna is, who said that? That was Torre. Yeah, Rihanna's pretty much the singles queen, you know. And with Rihanna, she racked up so many accolades and stats really quick. You know, like she has more number one singles than Stevie Wonder, Janet Jackson. I want to say Whitney Houston. I think she's beaten Whitney Houston. It's either Whitney or Michael. A lot of the greats have come before. I mean, she racked those singles up like nobody's business because she was the perfect marketing type of act for that. You know what I mean? She was young. The songs were right. When you listen to a lot of her albums, aside from maybe the last two, Unapologetic and Anti, I think they put more focus on the substance in those albums. But the ones before that, especially Good Girl Gone Bad, you know, and Loud, it was really, let's make literally every track be something that could possibly be a single and push it that way. And that's how she racked up all of those hits. Like Rihanna used to get it in. What else are y'all saying on here? And exactly, that's Alan, like you're saying, like these people are at on the records and everything. They're at 100 million records, and they're at this 100 million and this, that, and the third. And when you look at how much they sold, a lot of these people did it all in less than 5 years. So acts who came out before them, who took 15, 20, 30, 40 years to get the same accolades, you're watching newer acts come and eclipse that in a matter of 5 years. So the fact that the person that made that tweet thought that Cardi B really eclipsed all of somebody like Janet Jackson's career with one album. You know, Janet Jackson has 11 studio albums and some remix albums and like 2 greatest hits albums. And I think she came out in 1982. And so you honestly think that an artist who came out in 2017 has already done so much that they've outsold everything from somebody who came out in 1982? All right. What else did y'all say here? Dang, y'all been commenting. I should have been looking while I was running my mouth. Somebody's talking about the 8-track lady. Millennials were born. Yep, 80 to 95. Actually, y'all find about when they were born. Okay. I'm trying to scroll down. Yeah, I got a lot here. Solo artists, concept albums. Yep, they started having that in the 70s. I agree, Judith. All right, I'm gonna start wrapping up, and then I'm gonna kind of address your comments, and we can just kind of chit chat. Some of the last things I was gonna say. So I already talked about the Drake bit, and then also when we're talking about streaming and album sales, we got to talk about the demographics who are purchasing. The music industry is very youth driven. It's youth driven. So the reason why a group like NSYNC sold 2.4 million copies that first week when No Strings Attached came out was because they had this really huge special on MTV the day the album dropped. There was already anticipation. And so you get a bunch of hormonal teenage girls who, you know, because music is also something where, have you ever heard of, there's a theory called the spiral of silence theory, where pretty much you go with the wave of what everybody else is doing. So let's just say like I walk into a room and it's me and 50 people, and all 50 people are saying they really, 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 really hate Pepsi. Pepsi is trash. It's the nastiest thing they ever drink. And I mean, they're just disgusted with it. And let's just say I'm a Coke fan. Most likely, I'm going to just keep my mouth shut and not really say too much about Coke. If everybody in this room, especially if it's a room of people I respect that I'm trying to impress, most likely I'm going to kind of keep my mouth shut and not even shake the table about Coke. That's how music works, only in the opposite realm. If everybody's jumping on the wave, it pulls more people in and everything like that. And so it's youth driven. And so what's happening now is older acts who came out before the streaming era, even before the digital era, those acts who came out in the 70s, 80s, and the 90s, they're at a catch-22 or at a fork in the road because it's harder for people to access their music. One, somebody like, I'm gonna say Regina Belle, because I just saw her on TV the other day and she had an album come out. Regina Belle is somebody who my demographic we don't listen to. It's going to be somebody in my parents' demographic who appreciates Regina Belle. People who would buy her albums most likely will go to the store and purchase it. They'd most likely go to Best Buy or wherever else and purchase it physically because that demographic is not really streaming as much as the 17-year-olds, as much as the 25-year-olds, even as much as the 30-year-olds. You know what I mean? And so, you know, think of that uncle you have who still has a flip phone. Who'll be out there using that flip phone. That flip phone uncle is not going on Spotify to hear an album. He's going to go to the store and go look for it. And the other issue is now record labels are no longer putting as many physical albums out because it saves money to just go ahead and release it to streaming as opposed to printing out the CDs that nobody's really going to buy. So that uncle with the flip phone, you know, the Nokia or the Motorola, or remember the chocolate cell phone, you know, that phone, he's going to go to that store and can't find that album. And I guarantee you, he's not going to ride all around town looking for it if he can't find it. After a while, he's like, the hell with it. And then on the flip side, if it's on Spotify, if he's not somebody who does Spotify, he's most likely not going to listen to that album. That's why you see a lot of the older acts who are still selling out arenas and having these big successful shows, and they're having really big hits on the urban AC charts as far as radio play. Their albums are not, and the singles are not really doing anything. Toni Braxton's the perfect example. The Long As I Live has probably been one of the biggest hits in R&B right now for the last, few months, but the album didn't really do anything. The singles didn't really move a whole lot of units in the streaming world. And that's because her audience, even though her audience does have younger people, I guess in my age demographic, her core audience is much older, but they're most likely to go and buy the physical copy. But that physical copy is not available in all places like it used to be. Think about how you've watched the CD section at those stores get smaller and smaller and smaller. Those days of Walmart and Best Buy having shelf after shelf. And 2 rows would be R&B, and this row would be rock, and this would be country. And now it's like you got R&B, country, pop, jazz, experimental, world music, all in the same row. Like, that's what it is now. And so for older acts, it's a little harder for them to generate revenue with sales because the core demographic who really supports them has kind of been left out as the music industry moved forward. They kind of just cut them out of the picture, even though those are the ones with the money. Those are the ones with purchasing power. Those are the ones who can really balance out that loss in revenue because they would still go and buy physical CDs. But because they were so pressed to really appease the younger crowds who were streaming and clicking the mouse and clicking the button on the phone, they pretty much eradicated older audiences from the music industry. And so, and don't get me wrong, don't think that just, I'm saying anybody over the age of 45 only gets like a physical CD. Don't worry, they still have people who stream and do everything else. But that core demographic, their lane was really going and purchasing. That's what they like to do. They like to go and have the actual CD. They like to have the collection. The most entertaining thing is my mother, she's somebody who buys CDs. And I've been trying to get her to understand, like, I remember when my album came out and she was like, well, where's the physical one? I want the CD. I'm like, Mom, I'm not paying for the CD because ain't nobody buying it like that. So, here, let me show you how to get it on iTunes. And then she'd call me, Michael, I'm at so-and-so's house. I'm trying to play in your song. How I get to the song? You showed me. Mom, go to your iTunes app. Well, where's that at? It's on your phone. How? Slide the thing over. And so, that's the demographic. So, and mind you, those people still listen to music. There's this assumption that once people hit 40, they don't listen to music anymore. Like, people still love music. You know what I mean? And so there's limits. I'm almost done here. And the last thing I was going to say is definitely with the streaming era, now you have the constant influx of constantly releasing because music is so instant now and it's not as appreciated because of course it's just available. Like, you have to think albums had anticipation, like we said before, and Sade's a perfect example. Sade, that band, they go in the 80s, they came out with an album every 2 or 3 years, but after the 90s, it would be 7 years between the albums. Like, I remember they came out with an album in 2000 and people flocked and bought that crap. The anticipation was there. People were waiting. Now, I'm not saying go and wait 7 years. They were a unique brand. People will always support them. Everybody else can't do that. But, they wait 7 years. And then they waited another, they didn't come back out till 2009. And it was huge. That thing sold like 500,000 copies the first week because there's anticipation for the album. People know that while you're gone, you're cooking up something good. You're putting out something that's going to really it's going to have longevity and replay value. And so today, labels don't have time for that because, again, they're making a fourth of what they made 20 years ago, but there's more demand for more music by the listening audiences. And so they constantly have to put out music. That's why somebody like Ariana Grande had 2 albums come out in a 7-month span. You know what I mean? That's why Drake constantly has a new song like every 3, 4, 5 months. You constantly see a lot of the newer artists, they just come out with an album and then it's like, 8 months later, we got the new one coming out because now the need for more is there. And that may be one of the downfalls to the music industry over time is as the labels try to figure out what the needs of the people are. And if they make too many of the wrong guesses, it kind of sabotages everything. So now with the constant releases, you're seeing the quality of the music go down, especially in production value. You're seeing, and now that I started doing music myself, and I listen to music so differently now, like I pay attention to that little chime that was way off in the back under 30 layers of reverb that you hit. Like, I pay attention to all that crap now. And you're noticing with some producers and some songs, there's not a lot of effort and detail. You can tell some of these songs are put together in a day or two and then released. And then even with the recording, go ahead, throw some nice little pitch correction and auto-tune, go ahead and throw it out there. Let's get it out there quick. You're hearing that. And that's why I think you're hearing so much of the same thing across all genres. And I think I said this in some video I made not too long ago, but I was talking about the country music world. Country music artists, a lot of them are pissed off because the sound everything is becoming so generic. And so now you have like the snap track songs that are country ballads. Like literally they're R&B songs with a guitar and a dude in a cowboy hat. It's literally R&B songs. They're not even country songs. They don't really fit the flow of what country would have been to diehard country fans. And so the Brooks and Dunn, Shania was more pop, but Faith Hill, those die-hard Dixie Chicks before everybody got pissed off at them kind of country acts. People, those fans hate what's out today. Literally hate it. Go on YouTube and see the comments under something. Now, the woman who won all those Grammys, the Musgraves, I think that's her name. Now, people like her because she's kind of more traditional, but a lot of the newer stuff that's in country, people hate. And it's because the genres are starting to all merge together. All of your pop acts that are out now are very R&B influenced. Ariana, she thinks she's black and a half now. So with each single, she gets a little darker and everything. Now, I think she has a great voice, but yeah, with each single, she gets a little darker. The sound is a little bit more hip hop influenced, a little bit more R&B influence. And to be fair, her sound was always always had those elements of R&B, even with the first album, but the imaging, everything is different. And it seems like with a lot of acts, the effort isn't there. Everybody and their mom works with the same producers. You know what I mean? Who's going to be in your album? Oh, I'm working with this producer, and that producer. And then you go ask a different artist who they're working with, and they say the same 3 people. Then you ask another artist, and they say 2 of those 3 people. And then you wonder why everybody's stuff sounds the same. Even with trap music, I think trap music has gotten lazy. I think, honestly, I'm not a big fan of trap music, but it was better 5 years ago. I think there are some cool songs that come out, but a lot of it's lazy production now. The effort is gone. The ear for music. And because now music has always been a business, but now business is really the forefront. Everybody's just trying to get paid. It's not even about making people feel good anymore. So you have that going on. And so, again, the summary of this is just recognizing that you can't take elements of what happened in the streaming era and compare it to the physical era and think they're interchangeable. You just can't, because it doesn't add up. All right. So when you're talking about, and even with that, that's what kind of changed the narrative. You saw before 2005, people only counted the albums that they sold. You didn't count records. Records just meant singles. So it was the albums that were the conversation. So that's why you saw everybody's numbers just jump in like a 2-year span, even though they may not have been selling that much. So TLC is a perfect example. You know, they sold about 30 million albums total, as far as Crazy Sexy Cool, Ooh on a TLC Tip, Fan Mail, 3D, and I think the last one was called TLC. 30 million albums sold. We're not counting the singles, just albums sold. And as the digital era kicked in and singles started to be the forefront, and you had newer artists coming out who have only been out for 2 years, just like, oh, I sold 40 million copies. People were like, hold up, no, you didn't. And you found out that 40 million copies, 32 of them was single sales and only 8 were album sales. The people who used to move albums were like, oh, hell no. Well, we're going to count our record sales too. So then TLC's numbers jumped from 30 million to 65 because they included what happened with all of the singles and the elements of streaming and everything like that. Same with Janet. If you went to 2001, her things were always saying she sold 55 million albums worldwide. You're like, okay, cool. You fast forward today, when you read the press releases, it's like 160 million albums sold. And you're like, wait a minute, but you forgot they counted all of those singles. And then you forget somebody like Janet was the 7th most successful person on the Hot 100. You know what I mean? And Hot 100 is a chart that measures single success. Because with her singles, what was unique about her experience is her singles sold a lot in that era. Like something like Together Again sold 7 million copies in 1997. Now, remember, we were comparing the Boyz II Men singles that were selling, 1.3 million copies? Together Again sold 7. Because it was such an international smash. And on top of that, the Velvet Rope album still sold like 10 million copies. So Janet had a best of both worlds, where the singles were selling a lot globally and the albums were selling a lot. And a lot of the big acts had that. Madonna had that. Whitney had that. Mariah really had that. Michael had that. Prince had that. Boyz II Men had that. And when you got into the later years, I'd say somebody like a Britney Spears had that with the album sales. The singles weren't really moving as much. But I think Christina Aguilera would be somebody who had a better balance of the singles really moving and the albums. And so, again, everything is not interchangeable. It's the same like when people count touring sales and touring revenue. If you're going to compare the success of tours today to the tours tomorrow, you can't use revenue because of inflation. So you're seeing a lot of acts who've been out. And it's like, oh, this tour sold $300 million in revenue. And you're like, yeah, but it's like they charge like $700 for front row seats. They charge, even to sit in the back, you had to pay $108. And then, you go back to the 80s, concert tickets, you can get into a concert for $7, depending on where you were trying to sit. So if you're going to compare concert success, what you're going to have to compare is how many butts are in the seats, count the number of people who showed up. That's how you can measure what the success is. And so again, that's pretty much everything. I'm gonna kind of look, and I'll hang with y'all for a few more minutes and kind of see what we're talking about in the comment section. I didn't even get to drink my little tea here. It's all cold every single time. Anyway, so you guys drop all of your questions. We're gonna chit chat for a few minutes, and then I'm gonna wrap it up here. What are y'all talking about? Y'all said bubblegum, the awards as well, because I know Michael Whitney Jenner got the most awards of all time. With the awards, as far as Jeremiah's talking about just the awards and how some people are really racking up awards, and sometimes the awards don't add up to what you're seeing. I think one of the benefits to being an artist in those earlier years were that there were so many different award shows, especially if you were a Black artist. Okay, yes, there was the Grammys and the AMAs and the Billboard Awards and the VMAs, but you had the Source Awards and the Vibe Awards, and then you had the Soul Train Awards, and not just the Soul Train Awards, but also the Lady of Soul Awards and the NAACP awards. And then you had, literally there would be award shows that would only last for 1 or 2 years. Like there were so many different award shows. So there were a rack of artists who they were able to rack up awards that are not even accessible today. And even some of the newer acts, what worked in their favor would be like the Grammys. Some of those acts who've had and sold not sold a rack of Grammys, gotten a lot of Grammys. The Grammys have changed. So the Grammys used to be more genre specific and also gender specific. And they started merging that together and cutting some of the genre categories out. And so that's why you're not seeing certain artists really rack up the Grammys anymore. So somebody like Beyonce, who, gosh, she has so many. I don't even remember what do y'all know? How many Grammys does Beyonce have? One of y'all put it in the comments. I know she got like at least 20, I think 21. What does she have? I know one of y'all know. I know one of y'all know that 23. Thank you, AJ. So like 23. It's going to be really hard for somebody else who's come out after Beyonce to get that same kind of success, even if they sold the same amount of records and had the same amount of hits. Because like I said earlier, when I said like the Michaels and the Princes and the Whitneys came out of an era that was closed off to those who came before them and closed off to those who came after, Beyonce and like Kanye and Alicia and Jay-Z are kind of in that category when it comes to the Grammys. They come from an era that's closed off to the people before them and the people after them. That's why Beyonce has like 23 Grammys, but Toni Braxton has like 7. And Mariah, I think, has 5 or 6. You know what I mean? It's just a different time, different day and age. Doesn't mean one is better than the other. It's just the way that the industry is set up. All right, what else are we talking about? Not one of y'all saying 0. That was not me. Max. Oh yeah, like Stevie is a perfect example as well. What are we talking about? Increments, how are they making their money? Oh wait, if artists are releasing albums in 8-month increments, how are they making their money when the labels own the rights to their music? That's the other thing. They're not making money from their album sales. Album sales are no longer the say all be all when it comes to making revenue from your album. If you got signed, do you guys ever watch like Unsung? Like I think if you really like to catch up on like music history, Unsung is such a good show to watch. It's the closest thing I can get to behind the music. But and actually, to be honest, I think Unsung is a better show. But back then, if you had a record that went gold, you still got so much money from if you wrote the song, or if you had a good deal where you got enough of a percentage, you could still live well off of it. And a lot of artists used to have more of a hand in their own songs as far as production, songwriting, and understanding negotiation with their deals. And so because the labels were making so much money from the album sales, okay, the album sells 500,000 copies, you were still going to get a good 6-figure check from that. If an album sells 500,000 copies today, you're not getting anything. You know what I mean? So the industry's kind of shifted. What else are we talking about? Yes, that Motown. Are you talking about the Jennifer Lopez Motown tribute? Who said that? Yes. I don't know what that was about. I'm still mad about that. I don't know who thought that was okay. Hey, Carolyn Jean. Yep. You're from Brooklyn. I know you. How do you make money if you only have 5 to 10 writers on them? Only choice is to tour. Exactly, touring for life. And you know what sucks? With a lot of the older acts, I feel bad for the acts that didn't get the luxury of understanding the business. That's why I always get mad when people make fun of like a TLC for going broke a few times, or Tony for not having any money, because without the lessons learned from their experience, newer acts wouldn't have understood the importance of getting your royalty and your publishing and writing and production and having a say in everything. Because again, a TLC, perfect example. You make $75 million for your label from 2 albums, but you only get $150,000. a piece. And that's before taxes. And you got to pay off the lawyer. You got to pay back what's owed to the like, so people can make fun of them for whatever financial situation they're in, but without that experience, newer acts would have understood that you need to be on top of things. You might need to start your own production company. And with that, now you have those acts. In order for them to sustain the lifestyle that they're going to want to have, they literally have to work forever, which sucks. If Beyonce wants to quit today, she can go home and never do another thing again. And she don't ever got to work again. The babies ain't ever got to work again. When the babies have kids, them kids ain't got to work again. And you know what I mean? They're just sitting on so much because they were so well, like a Beyonce and what her father had going on with her was so well studied as far as what she needed to take charge of in her career and what she needed to own, that she's set for life. You know what I mean? And so that's what sucks about some of the older acts. Like when you watch something like an Unsung, you saw so many of those acts get manipulated and get these really crappy record deals where they weren't making any money. And you got to think the 80s was the era of big bands and groups where it was 8-9 people in the group. If it was a band, if it was some DeBar's thing, it was like 5 or 6 of them. If it was the Jets, it was like 8-9 of them in the band. If it was Atlantic Star or Midnight Star or the SOS Band or Yarborough and Peoples, like all these people, these groups had so many members. And so, let's say the album goes platinum, and by the time the record label's paid back with everything, there's a check that's sitting for $1.2 million. You got to split it with 8 people. And mind you, if there's a lead singer, the lead singer is already going to get like 20-30%. So really, you're splitting that 70% with the other members in the group, while that lead singer gets that 30%. And really, it's still not a lot of money. So, again, the best thing that could have happened for these newer acts is that so many acts before them struggled and had lessons that they had to learn, because it helped them to understand what they need to do. What else are we talking about on here? Unsung. They did an episode. I didn't finish seeing the Adina Howard episode. I got to the part where she was beefing with Brandy, but I kind of nodded off because I was watching it at like 2 a.m. Anyway, any other questions before we wrap? Because I don't want to keep you guys too long. I'm long-winded. I'll be here all night running my mouth about music. TLC. Oh, Martha Wash. Yeah, great example of artist that got screwed over. Definitely. Eazy-E. Yeah, I still have questions about how he died. I don't think he went down. I really believe that whole bit about Suge Knight just giving him straight full-blown AIDS, and that's what killed him off, because it was rare that you get HIV and it would turn into full-blown AIDS in less than a year. You died. I don't know about that during that time period. Let me see. Why? Oh, this thing's moving fast. Hold on, y'all. All right. My question is why those who are going for their masters buying studios are getting killed. Yeah, Jam Master Jay, right? People or Prince and Michael. A lot of people think, acts who ended up getting their publishing or buying catalogs are being killed. Like if you look at, Michael Jackson literally owned half the music industry. He owned not half the music industry, but he owned half of Sony. Half of Sony. People always talk about the Beatles catalog, but it was more than just the Beatles. The reason we always hear about the Beatles catalog is because Paul McCartney was pissed that Michael bought it. But that catalog, Michael owned literally half of everything Sony had. It was to the point where and one of the nice things I thought he did was he went and he purchased, all of the masters for Little Richard and gave it back to him, because Little Richard got screwed over too in the industry. And so a lot of people think that Michael, he was worth more dead than alive, and people think that there's still foul play behind his death. And then you saw, that documentary. Y'all asked me about that documentary. Listen, I still haven't seen the whole thing. I only watched like the first 20 minutes, and I was like, I got to come back to this when I'm ready to actually watch it. But again, I don't really trust the Wade Robson dude, and I'm not don't look at this as me trying to doubt the claims of a victim or anything. It's just in his situation, just from what I've read on paper, there's too many loopholes that I'm just like, So I'm going to actually, I'm going to watch it, not this weekend because I'm busy, but maybe I might actually sit through it during the weekend and I'll give my real 2 cents, because I can only say so much because I haven't seen it. But yeah, but I will say this, the issue I have right now is it seems like a lot of those who would be considered legends in Black music, it seems like a lot of them, their legacies and lineage just gets torn down. Like Whitney, for her to be one of the greatest, she'll always be remembered to some people as just being a crackhead. And all of a sudden, Prince is a drug addict. When did we ever know Prince to ever do drugs? Prince was vegan. He kept himself together. He was somebody, I just don't, if he did overdose on the drug thing, it was because he had the back issue and he was in pain. Somehow they twisted that and made it seem like Prince was always high as a kite every day. And you're seeing that happen. It's like they just tear down all of the people that we celebrate. But I'll say this. What I noticed with the Michael Jackson thing, and again, I'm not about to sit here and go back and forth about what I think he did and what he didn't do, but it's funny that somebody like Elvis can go and marry a 14-year-old girl, and you don't hear anybody talking about that. Elvis is the king. They celebrated all kind of interviews, and oh, he was such a gentleman and everything like that. I think the only person who really got held accountable in that situation with these men and younger children, and I'm not saying Michael's with younger children because I ain't seen the documentary and I still have yet to see anything on paper that's tangible. Jerry Lee Lewis might have been the only person I know that really caught it that was white. And remember, he married his 13-year-old cousin, and people were like, "What the?" Oh, hell no. So that was a dude that had the Great Balls of Fire song. He is the only dude I know that was white that messed with underage girls that was held accountable for it. Like, and some people are going to say, well, that was the time of the era. And I'm like, I don't know, because clearly people were pissed about Jerry Lee Lewis. So where was that smoke with Elvis? That's all I'm saying. Plus, he stole everything anyway. Still in that. Try not to cuss on here. What else? Anyway, what else we got? I don't want to spend all day. Britney was not the only way Robinson stuck with. And then with Little Richard, Elvis stole a lot of stuff from him, and same with Pat Boone stealing all of Little Richard stuff too. And the reason they did that with Pat Boone, some people thought that Little Richard and some of those acts who came out in those earlier years, like a Johnny Taylor, some of the radio programmers were scared to play them because they thought they were too edgy, they were too so that's why you had people like Pat Boone go in and easy listenify. I'm just gonna make up a word. Easy listenify the song and make it a little smoother, a little bit safer for your mothers to play at the picnic in the neighborhood, because we're very conservative and classy with the way we do things, and we don't want to do that stuff that's a little too urban, too much bass line, too much tambourine, and too much organ. Got to make it nice and safe for the kids, because those race records. That's what they call them race records. Got to be careful with those things. They'll corrupt our children, make our children violent, and sell drugs, and join gangs, do heroin. That's why Nixon is starting the war on drugs, and then Reagan's gonna reignite it in the 80s. Anyway, in the war on crime. What are we talking about? Back to R&B. Why do SZA, Kalani, and LMA all sound similar? I think it goes back to what I was saying with production value. And again, now it's the point where you have record labels that the emphasis is on money. It's not about quality. And don't get me wrong, I think the three of them make nice music, but the labels recognize that is the sound that's in. And so they're not going to put any artists who steer away from that sound. They're going to keep everybody around that pocket. And then when that sound dies, they'll push all of those artists out there, bring in somebody who has a newer sound. That's how it always works. In the past, especially with R&B, you had so many different kind of sounds you could jump on, and artists had an opportunity to kind of do whatever they wanted. As far as R&B today, because labels are so afraid of R&B because it was having such a hard time between about 2009 and I want to say 2014, 2015, they're not going to let artists experiment and shake the table too much creatively. They want them to stay in a safe pocket. And as you saw the decline of a lot of big acts, like an Alicia Keys, who at one point used to sell the same amount of records, if not more, than somebody like Beyonce, and the same with somebody like Usher, as you saw their decline, label execs were like, wait a minute, we don't want to mess up too much. We're not going to invest too much in these artists that way. We want, so when they found what sounds worked, it's like, let's stick with that because we know that sells. We don't want them to go and experiment too much. The pop artists can go and do it. The pop artists can go and do whatever they want with R&B and it catch on. But the actual R&B artists, no, we just want you to stay in this lane. So right now we're in this vibe lane. Everything is a vibe right here. Keep it smooth. And that's where it's going to be, because that's what the labels want. And how you can tell that there's a difference is listen to what the indie acts are doing. The indie acts aren't doing this. The indie acts are doing whatever they want to do and having a great time with it. That's why y'all should buy my album on April 26th. But the indie acts are doing whatever they want. Those on the major labels, they got to do what the label says, because the label's not going to, because that's the other thing with the music industry. If you went against the label and they were against whatever you wanted to do, then you were on your own. And if it flopped, there's that. Kelly Clarkson had that issue when she was coming out with, it's the album she had where it was that song, I think it was like My Life Would Suck Without You or something like that. Her and Clive Davis were beefing about the album's direction and everything like that. So they let her do what she wanted and it didn't do well. And then that's when she came out with the album that had Breakaway and Since You've Been Going and all of that. Because it was like, now do what we told you to do. This is the sound that you got to jump on. Let's see. Now they hired a Harvard professor to do with R&B music without looking at racist. Hold on. That was a good comment. Let me go back up. Oh, y'all smart putting it in red. I can see it for real. Now they hired a Harvard professor to figure out a way to do away with R&B soul music. Without looking right. Yep. Same with disco. Didn't we just talk about that like 2 videos ago? Exactly. Yes. Nile Rodgers, guys, read that. That's a really good read. The Freak. It's a really good read because you remember Nile Rodgers is the producer. He was from Chic, but he produced literally the sound of the 70s and the early 80s. Like Nile Rodgers is that dude. That's a great book. Thank you for that. HTV3. Um, Sam Cooke's documentary I enjoyed as well, but like I said, I wish they would have spent more time talking about his death because I think there was some foul play behind that as well. And they tried to make it look like he just went and got a prostitute and got shot, and I don't buy that at all either. Plus, again, he was somebody who was outspoken. He ran with Malcolm X, he ran with Muhammad Ali, he ran with Jim Brown before Jim Brown started tripping. And so, of course, Sam Cooke, who at the time had literally all of white America in the palm of his hands, as well as black folks, because his voice was so silky smooth and he had such a smooth presence and an appealing. He kind of, I'm not going to put him in the same boat with Nat King Cole because Nat King Cole didn't talk politics. Nat King Cole wanted to stay safe. But Sam Cooke initially, when he came out with those songs like For Sentimental Reasons and Cha 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 and the That's the Sound of the Chain, whatever that song is, the Chain Gang, I think, he was safe. So by him all of a sudden starting to be a little bit more political on things, that's scary for some people. So yeah, there could have easily been some foul play with that. Yes, I agree, Leah Brown, as far as Alicia Keys and the side eye she got with Mashonda and Swizz Beatz. I think that played a role. Let's see. Yeah, the Sam Cooke bio or doc is on Netflix. Do you think if the Super Bowl didn't happen, Janet would have made for Now by Janet would be big on the Hot 100? I think with Janet, how do I word? So with Janet, I think the Super Bowl did do a huge number on her because it got her banned from all the radio stations. And we've seen now that this Les Moonves dude, everything that's going on with him, that's the dude that's married to Julie Chen. Yes, you saw Les Moonves. He pretty much went out of his way to end her career. So just to give some context, before the Super Bowl, every song that was eligible to chart on the Hot 100 from Janet Jackson was a top 10 hit between the years of 1986 and 2001. Every single song she released that was eligible. There were some songs that weren't eligible for a Hot 100 charting position because the songs weren't physically released. In the 90s, if you released a single, you couldn't just go to number one because it was number one on the radio. People had to purchase the actual physical single. So she had some singles that were not physically released, like Got Till It's Gone or Go Deep or a few other ones. And so, but the point that I'm making is, so literally every single between 1986 and 2001 was a top 10 hit, except for Pleasure Principle, which I think stalled at like number 16, and Son of a Gun, which was like, it stalled around the 50s. And I think that's because it came out around 9/11. And to another element, that's when Mariah Carey Virgin had just paid her $20 million to leave. And so that kind of screwed up the rest of the promotion for the All For You album, as well as Lenny Kravitz project. And so everybody on Virgin pretty much, because they had to put that $20 million out for Mariah, everybody's project that came out in 2001, 2002, kind of the energy into marketing, they had to figure out where they were going to make those cuts. And so it was just a lot of people suffered under that. But going back to what I said, every single song she had, to me, the same way Rihanna, literally you could burp in a mic and it was a hit, that's where Janet used to be. And so with that Super Bowl happening and the backlash and the conservatives pissed off about everything, and it was perfect timing because this is the same week or the same month that the stuff in Fallujah happened as far as Iraq, where we no longer had the upper hand in the war. And now you were seeing a lot of U.S. troops start to get killed. It was a perfect distraction from what was going on. It was a perfect distraction from the conversations as far as people are wondering, where are these weapons of mass destruction we can't see? And so what worked against Janet after the Super Bowl is, one, she was banned from MTV because Les Moonves played that role, and the whole Viacom pretty much banned her. The only reason BET couldn't ban her was because it was going to look suspect if you banned Janet Jackson from a black music network, even though it's owned by white folks. So she was banned from Viacom. That included anything on CBS, which is why she was disinvited from the Grammys, even though they said she needed to apologize, and she had already did, and she said she still couldn't come. So, banned from Viacom, no MTV. She was an MTV artist. She was a radio artist. Radio and MTV was her bread and butter. People look to Janet as a visual artist. She has an okay voice, but people don't go to Janet Jackson for vocals. No disrespect. Unless you're a fan like me and you can actually appreciate what she does vocally. Most people, when you think of vocals, she's not the first person that comes to your mind. So MTV, music videos, radio play, and exposure within pop culture was her way of selling records and having success. So when that got taken away, you watched the decline. And what worked against her as far as the song Made for Now is now she's 52, 53. The music industry is young. And so what's happening to her is the same thing that's happening to somebody like Madonna, where, the ageism kicks in. So not only is Janet now technically old for music industry standards, she still has the damage from that Super Bowl as far as being banned from everything. She's no longer banned. In 2008, she was unbanned from MTV and everything like that. But the industry had already shifted. And even with Janet's career, because the albums, the interest was no longer there by a lot of the masses, because once your image is tarnished by the public, sometimes it's hard to rebound. I think she's done a decent job of rebounding with the touring and everything, but the interest fades and people move on to somebody new. Everybody has their era, and then the next one comes. But the good thing for Janet is that she always had support in the R&B realm. So even though the pop songs weren't doing crap, if you looked at her last album, the No Sleep song was #1. The song Unbreakable was #5 on the R&B charts, and the song Damn Baby, I don't remember, I think it was #9. So she's still having that success, and it Made for Now was #1, I think, in Mexico. But you know, it just comes with the industry. As you get older, you fizzle out a little bit, and unfortunately for her, they just sped it up, because she was already 37, 38 when the Super Bowl happened. So she was already in that transition where, you know, the teenagers are like, oh, it's not Janet Jackson, the hot lady I want to put on my poster. It's Mrs. Jackson now. I mean, still gorgeous woman, but you know, and you got to think of all the newer acts who are coming out. So there's a bunch of politics that play in it. But Made for Now, I think, had the Super Bowl not happened, I honestly don't know where her career would be. I think it would have been, I think she still would have fizzled down a little bit, but she still would have had much more success. And maybe Made for Now would have, I don't even think she would have came out with a Made for Now, honestly. Anyway, we're going to wrap this up, guys, because I don't want to keep you guys on here all night, but this was awesome. Thank y'all for riding with me. I'm going to read a few more comments. Yes, Jill Scott is a great artist. Yeah, we know Justin got a slap on the wrist and movie deals and everything else. I just learned to let it go, so don't stress me out no more. Disco music brought people together in the 80s and 70s before racism in the industry. That era was dancing music. I do agree, in my opinion, yes, I will give Janet that title as probably the best dancer, female dancer in the music industry. No ifs, ands, or buts. Sierra fans, no disrespect. Maya, I think, would be a close second out of that peer group. But yeah, I would still give it to Janet. She's older now, so she has to fall back with what she does. But those early years, I wish the Janet tour would go on DVD, man. That's when you can really see her in her element. What else? Madonna's a replica of Janet Jackson. Oh, I'm not about to have that argument. The Madonna fans are crazy. But with Madonna, you know what? I was never big on Madonna. I respect what she's been able to accomplish. I guess the beef I've always had is it's hard to really go hard for somebody like Madonna when singers exist for the vocals, and then you have somebody like a Janet that exists for performing. Madonna's claim to fame, people always say they liked her because she pushed the envelope, but to me, I'm like, Grace Jones was already doing that, and there were acts before her that did that. I think Madonna doesn't get the credit as far as songwriting, because she does write a lot of her stuff, but just something with her that never connected with me. And I do have some of her albums just because I pretty much buy everybody's music, because I, as a music fan, and I like to label myself a historian, I do like to follow everybody's work. If I had a Madonna album that I would gas up, it'll probably be the Bedtime Stories album. But Madonna they just would gas her up and be like, oh, she's the greatest thing. And I'm like, why? Because she sucked on a cross and pissed off a bunch of people? Cool, but if I close my eyes, I can't see any of that. But I can hear Whitney hitting some crazy note unheard of. You know what I mean? So there's that. Anyway, any last questions? I'm gonna get off exactly at 11:45. So we got like 5 minutes. What else are we talking about? And yeah, Madonna did a lot of problematic stuff. I'll give her accolades and all, but it to see that she's pretty much the most successful woman in music, I sometimes have a problem with that. Anyway, Millie Jackson. Yep, thank you. Millie Jackson was another one who really pushed the envelope. And I think she even had that quote where she said, I can't remember the quote. It was this quote she said about like her versus a Diana Ross. I can't remember. And it wasn't like anything shady. She was just saying the differences in how they were perceived by the masses. I can't think of that quote, but Millie Jackson is a great example. What I mean when somebody is saying, what do you mean she fizzled out? Janet hasn't fizzled out as far as the work ethic in itself. I'm talking about the masses being aware of her. Like even when I started my job and my kids found out I liked her, they didn't know who she was. They're like, oh, can she moonwalk? I said, excuse me? Because there's a disconnect, because literally during her downfall, they tried to erase everything that woman ever put out. And so the good thing about what's happened with her now is like her team has really been trying to rebrand her and make people remember, like, listen, this was a woman who just commanded things, and y'all trying to act like she wasn't that person back in the day. So that's what I mean. Janet has been touring for the last 2-3 years and doing everything she's doing. So good for her. Anything Kashif? Are you talking about Kashif with Love Changes? Well, I have no voice to try to sing that. That sounded terrible. But Kashif. Yes, Leah, she is, unfortunately. That's what SoundScan in the Hot 100 says. Y'all going in on Madonna. Lord, I did not start that. Don't have these Madonna fans coming after me tomorrow. I don't have time to be reading that crap in the comment section. Brandy and Monica were the biggest acts out of the 90s. They were to younger demographics. Yes, the cool thing about the 90s was that's what I miss about it. Like, there were categories for everybody. So you had the legends like the Patties and Aretha still having platinum hits in the 90s. And then you had the young acts like a Monica and Brandy just rack. Like, Monica had a really great 1998 where she had 3 #1 singles. Brandy had a really great era at that time as well because she had the Cinderella movie coming out. She had Barbie coming out. Never Say Never had sold like 16 million copies worldwide. Great for them. And then you still had the superstars that were a little bit older, the Whitneys and the Michaels and the Princes. Like, man, speaking of Kashif, I did what did you guys think of when Jamie Foxx and Mary J. Blige redid Love Changes? Yeah. Aaliyah, I liked Aaliyah as well. If I had a favorite era, I would definitely say, I think I like the Aaliyah era, even though we didn't get to see much of her. I loved what they did with the More Than a Woman video. I thought that was really creative because I never realized that she was dancing inside of the motorcycle. What else we got here? All right, we got 2 minutes, y'all. Oh, y'all going in on J-Lo now. Y'all, we're not about to turn this into y'all cussing out everybody. J-Lo, I have no comments. Just know that I'm a big Shantae Moore fan. And I remember what they did with her. And Mary J. Blige, she's that one. If I had a favorite Mary album, it's Share My World. I know y'all love the My Life album. Share My World will always be my favorite Mary album. Favorite from Stevie Wonder, Intervisions, Talking Book, Songs in the Key of Life, those 3, definitely. We got 2 minutes. The Irony, Mary's a Capricorn. I agree. Yeah, I do like the original a lot more than the Mary version. Do I sing or rap? Okay. I can talk about my album. We're going to add 2 more minutes to this. We're going to get off at 11:47. I don't consider myself a singer or a rapper. I would more so put myself in the lane of a producer that just makes music, who can just happen to sing and has a good ear. I'm not trying to be a singer because I think I'm a little too old now. The industry wouldn't open me with welcoming arms or open arms. You know what I mean? So my goal, I guess, with this project that's coming out, I just want people to hear good music, just to feel good. And we'll get into it. I don't want to talk about the new project too much, but it does come out April 26th. Right now, I'm in the process of trying to get this music video done, and I'm so behind. But the album is finished. I can't wait. And I mean, it's the setup is just like the last one. It's 22 tracks, so it's 17 songs, 5 interludes. I think if you enjoyed the last one, you're really, really, really gonna like this one. I put a little bit. I'm not gonna say more effort, but I found my pocket this time. So it's. I can't wait for it to come out. It's called The Hardcover. We'll jump into it a little bit later. Faith Evans doesn't get the flowers she deserves as far as albums. I've always wanted to know that. Who else? What we got? Share My World. Yeah, that's my. Speaking of Mary, did y'all ever see that clip with the woman who sings 7 Days at the funeral? Like, the backstory is the woman, she was the guy's mistress, and so she shows up to the funeral and she sings 7 days. It's the funniest clip. You gotta go watch it because she's like, I can't believe I just made love to you. They're like standing by the casket. Like, you gotta go watch that clip. It's the funniest thing. Let's see. Do you play music? Yes, I play a bunch of instruments. As a matter of fact, look, my keyboard is right here. Yeah, so everything with my albums, I do all the production, all the songwriting, all the vocal arrangements, every instrument, I do it all. So do we have a favorite artist a current artist that can have longevity? I think the artists that are going to have longevity, I think Janelle Monáe has a shot, especially if she keeps her touring trek up. I think Anderson .Paak has an opportunity to be a really popular touring artist. If you catch him, his show is just so dynamic that there's no way people won't pay to see his show, even though his music is not really catching on yet. I think he will have longevity. Of the newer acts, It's so hard, man. I think the rappers have a better. Some of the rappers have a better shot of hanging in there. I think Kendrick Lamar still has another good 10 years of success under his belt. Same with Drake and a J. Well, actually, J. Cole. I think Drake is on his way to burning out soon because too much at once, too much overexposure. No disrespect, but just too much. Let's see. We got 2 minutes, y'all. Oh yeah, Maxwell's great. We love Maxwell. He had a really good show I went to in 2009. Really great show. Mary, any last things, guys? This was really good. We'll try to do another live video, maybe in like a week or two. Not sure. We'll see. It depends. I just have to have something I actually want to talk about. I had been meaning to go live like last week, but my equipment was acting crazy. And I was trying to be like one of the fun people that go live and they can have like the clips and the stuff all in it. I couldn't figure that crap out. I was like, hell, we just gonna be up here talking. Oh wait, what did this person say? I'm gonna do 3 more questions, then I gotta go. Okay, everyone, and Calvin, list your top 3 songs you're listening to today. The top 3 songs I'm listening to today. Today. I like Anderson .Paak's Anywhere. My favorite song at the moment. I like. Let me dig in my phone and see what I got. What's recent that I've been playing. Let's see here. Okay, don't judge. I've been playing Sam Cooke, Blowing in the Wind for some reason. That's been my song lately. That's not even anything current, but you said today, so let me stick with today. I'm still playing To Me, You Leave It Smoking. I like that song a lot. And pretty much everything off the Internet album. I really enjoy that album. Especially the song Wannabe. I really like that song. And Tiana Taylor, the Who's Gonna Love Me is a good song. 2 more questions on here. Do you think music video shows like Soul Train Video Soul need to come back? I would like for there to be more shows that put emphasis on music videos, but it's hard because they keep trying to come out with these shows, but people aren't watching them because they can just go to YouTube and watch their favorite music videos. So I think if they're going to try to do that concept, what they have to do is they have to make the show based on performances. People will go watch a show of a performance. Like if you're a 13-year-old who's obsessed with BTS or something, and they wouldn't probably be on like a soul type show, but let's just say they were R&B and they were from here. But like if you're a 13-year-old that's obsessed with BTS and you find out that they're going to be performing on, Video Soul that day, kids will watch. You know what I mean? As opposed to if the same show was like, we're going to premiere their music video today, people will be like, oh, that's fine, but I can just check it on my phone on YouTube in like 5 minutes. So there's that. All right, one more question. Oh yeah, I like Gregory Porter too. He's awesome. My social media is Give Me a Beat, like GIMMIEABEAT. All right. And you can probably figure out where that comes from if you figure out who I like musically. Last one, favorite Janet tour. Oh, look, y'all on these Janet questions. Y'all gonna be thinking I'm like a stand for real, huh? I became a Janet fan after watching the Velvet Rope tour. That's how I taught myself how to dance. That tour and Michael's History tour I used to watch every day as a kid, and the Janet tour that Velvet Rope tour I just taught myself the whole thing as a child, as far as the choreography and stuff. But I really think if the Janet tour would finally be released, I might almost like that one just as much. All right, last one for real this time, y'all. I gotta go to bed. I'm gonna get cussed out because I'm gonna be late to work. Let's see. This was good, guys. Yeah, you're right. I'm just have to hang up. Bye. I'll see y'all later. Last one. I didn't get to watch growing up. Married music. You know what? And I didn't even get to see Janet until the Rock With You tour. My mom wouldn't let me go to the All For You tour because she thought Janet was like just the most trashy thing. Because my mom happened to find out that Janet was, tying them into the stage. She's like, nope, you ain't going to that. And so I didn't see Janet until 2008. But the cool thing is I got to go to that tour. Most people didn't see that tour, and I got to see it twice. So I'm like, what's up? Last question. Yeah, my album, April 26th is the day. I'll have, and with it, I'm going to actually try to promote this one. The last one I didn't really promote. I pretty much just came out with it and was like, okay, that was fun. All right, what's next? And then I went into writing scripts for some other stuff. So anyway, guys, this has been great. And I was terrified of going live because I didn't know what kind of comments I was going to get. I was like, I shake the table a bit when it comes to politics. So I just knew it was going to be like, F you, you black. I was like, how many trolls are going to be on here? But hey, no trolls. So cool. Anyway, I am out. I will announce when we do another one of these. So you guys have a great night. And I'll probably try to get in one more video this week. I'm really trying to get this album rollout right. I still got to do the photo shoot. I got like a spot right here. I'm trying to get clear before I do the album cover on a few things. But anyway, I'm out. So good night. You guys be safe, please, because people are crazy out in this world. And yes, go change somebody's life for the better. Anyway, talk to you guys later. Goodbye.